we're here and we're on the podcast and we're recording with Rena Friedman Watts, who is a passionate storyteller. She's the host of the Better Call Daddy podcast, where real life stories meet timeless advice. Now, Rena has a background in radio and in marketing and with the Jerry Springer show, and she's a mom and a podcaster, and she's all about stories and is helping us be the best version of ourselves and grow the best business we can and have fun, make the most of this life. So we'll jump in and just have quite a variety of ideas and discussions. So Rena, nice to see you and nice to be meeting with you.
Nice to be meeting with you. And I loved our little behind the scenes conversation that we had before this. One of my first tips is always record from the time you start talking until the time you end talking, because all the juiciness happens behind the scenes.
Yeah. And so that's a good tip right there off the bat, right, for podcasters. And there's no reason not to. With this day and age, with the cloud and fast internet and storage, like we can store all of it. And when you have the Zoom account and it can just auto record whatever, like I've recently been picking up doing the pre-calls and the post-calls with podcast guests. And so it's like, hey, that's some AI goodness, right? Dump out the transcript, get some insights, remember about what was said. There's all sorts of benefits and upside to it. And so I'd love to jump into that in a minute, but we have to like do things in their proper order, right? So what are you all about? We introduced with your bio a little bit, but what did I miss, or what is your current focus and passion?
Yeah, my current focus and passion, I feel like, is kind of fueled by my relationship with my dad. He is my number one supporter and biggest fan. And I've been kind of like leading with that lately. I went to a meetup yesterday in town. It was a Cup of Joey event here in Houston. They do them all over the city. And instead of starting off and introducing yourself with your name, you lead with your why. And I said, well, I wasn't always sure of what my why was, but my dad is like super sure of his. He's like, I am living for the people, from the past generation and for the future generation. I was like, ooh, I kind of like that. You can't know who you are unless you know where you came from. And so whether you try to deny it, whether you don't like to talk about parts of it, that's something that you'll have to work through and maybe learn how to self-edit. But it's something that I'm trying to bring into my own legacy today. And it's interesting when I tell people, hey, I love to interview dads, inspirational dads, somebody that's lacking a dad and maybe wants to borrow mine, other daddies' girls. Those stories have then been coming my way. And it also like really lightens the conversation where people are like willing to talk to you about vulnerable things because you're telling them a vulnerable thing.
Yeah. Well, nice. Well, there's so much there, and it hurts my brain just to think about what makes for good entertainment or podcast or education in general, right? There's all these blends, and even like you're talking about, you have like your personality, and then you have your dad who's more sure of himself, and then you have these other guests. Like, there's a lot of fun with that, right? You think about how many different buddy cop TV shows or movies, right? You have like the person who's more serious, the person who's more fun, and it's like, with podcasting, you get the guest on and we have this sort of back and forth. It's way more entertaining than just one person on video and pontificating. And so do you ever think about that? Or like, what's your take? Because I know you've done the Judge Alex and the Jerry Springer. Like, what's your take on blending the teaching and the fun? And how do we find that magic if we're doing our own videos or a podcast? Like, how do we get the spark?
That is a fantastic question. Blending education with fun. I think how you do that is, there's lots of different ways, right? You can research who you're talking to. What words do they use? What have they recently been involved in? What about that speaks to you, and how can you pull from that? That's one way that I feel like my interviews become fun, is that I kind of stalk my guests pre-talking to them, and I see like what are their most recent episodes about, or I check out their LinkedIn profiles, who recommended them. Can I reach out to those people and say, hey, like what would be a good question to ask that person? I see you wrote a raving review about them. What's something you're dying to know about that person? What's a curveball?
Ooh, yeah.
So you can know what that person is about in a general sense, but to make it fun, you need to know someone who knows them, or you need to find a common interest. And then you can have some fun because you can go deeper than just like a surface conversation.
Yeah, and because like you don't want to have too off the wall questions where you just like I'm just so random, but then you don't want the boring, bland job interview kind of things. And like you look at like a talk show on TV, right? You have some guests, and it's like kind of it stays within the bounds, but it goes into unexpected and strange places. And it's like we're doing a simpler version of that, you and me, right? We have our own little humble podcast. We're not speaking to millions and millions, but we still like talk to interesting people who want to have good content. And it's such a great time to be alive, isn't it? Where even when Facebook was up and coming, like maybe you'd post every couple of days, you post some photo, but on LinkedIn, you can really get this glimpse into someone's psyche, right? Because they filled in these things in their profile, you see their posts, see what their friends are, and then I don't know about you, Rena, but like I'll post something or reshare something and forget that I did. And then if someone brings up what I posted, I'm like, whoa, like they know me so well. We're connecting, we're hitting it off. It's like, no, no, no. They just did that little bit of a glimpse and looked at what you were talking about. And so to help us get a good idea of what you do, like, do you have any like moment or episode of your show that you're really proud of, like a good guest or a cool just happenstance with your dad that you think is worth sharing just to give us an idea of what you're all about?
Yeah, episode 210, I got to interview Jerry Springer, and Jerry Springer started my career. So catching up with him 20 years later and getting to ask him, like, hey, do you remember me when I was a kid? And, I've listened to you speak and give commencement speeches, and I've watched you, be the host of a court TV show now and be on Dancing with the Stars, and your daughter got married. And I've been following you all these years, and how much did you really know about what was happening to get these guests on the show? So it was like I got to have this moment with Jerry. One, thank him for starting my career. Two, kind of let him know that I've still been following him from afar, and then tell him about this idea that I came up with my own father. And he totally validated. He was like, that's something that can't be replicated. He was like, how smart is that? And I was like, to be honest, Jerry, I was like, I started it kind of because of my experience on your show. Like, I wanted to interview a wide range of people, people that I had experienced in my entertainment career. Judge Alex from working in court TV for 5 years, one of the nannies from Nanny 911. I worked on that for 3 seasons. I wanted to give people insight into my career path, but at the same time, I wanted to get, wisdom from people's life experiences and then share that with my dad and see what he thinks about that from his intergenerational take on it.
Right. And I'm really curious about just the whole Jerry Springer thing because like I mean he seems like a really smart guy, but then the Jerry Springer show, which is what he'll be known for, it's like it's really trashy, right? But then there's all this reality TV that's like it's you look at you watch a clip of it, you're like even like Big Brother or something. It's so stupid, but then millions of people watch it, so it's like okay, is it slightly less stupid because it really catches on? So, like, what's your take on all that? Like, because you have this podcast where you want to have this variety and tap into your past network and be interesting and entertaining, but then there's just always this weird blend of like the masses. It ends up there's a stuff like it doesn't make sense, right? When you have like this premise of like some reality show or premise of some podcast, but then you experience it and you're like, okay, now I get it. So like what do you even know like how the Jerry Springer show like came about or like why that caught on or like what's the underlying all that?
The thing is that everybody in their family has a Jerry Springer guest. Like everybody knows someone who could be on that show.
Right.
And, Jerry started as a newscaster. So he was brought in as an Emmy winning newscaster who was replacing Donahue. And his show started off where he wanted it to be more of that type of format. And when he was doing more like serious stories, his ratings were in the toilet. So they brought in a guy, Richard Dominic, who worked in the tabloids. And he knew how to write a good headline and, find a good story. And when the show started going crazy was a guy said, if you bring my ex-wife, I'll knock her out. And the executive producer was like, bring her. So he took a risk. And, you know, I think it was really like the beginning of reality TV. It was the beginning of the Big Brothers, the Real Worlds, the Road Rules, all of that. It was pre that. And one thing I loved about Jerry, to be perfectly honest, is he gave anyone a chance. Like he was literally willing to have people on, you know, that were picked up from their trailer space and they had never left that trailer before. He was willing to talk to famous people, homeless people, honestly, people that could be in the circus. And he made that cool. And other shows tried to replicate that. I mean, Howard Stern recycled his guests, Ricky Lake, all the talk show hosts tried and learned from Jerry.
But weren't as good. And why is that? Because you see there's like there's these elements of like relatability and adapting to what's working and changing up the format and taking the risks. But if it's that simple, why was no one as big or better than Jerry?
That's a great question. And I think over the years too, he evolved, right? The beginning of the show when they started beating out Oprah was like all of these fighting stories. But then the bread and butter of the show really became like the cheating stories. And so many people can relate to like, you know, getting the 7-year itch, or you know, there's a neighbor down the street that won't leave your husband alone. So 90% of the stories were cheating. And then it got a little bit crazy. Like, you know, I want to tell my parents I'm gay or I'm a transsexual or I'm sleeping with my sister. And it was like spin-offs, but of the original idea. So it was like, I'm cheating on my husband with a man, or I'm cheating on my husband with, you know, a stripper or somebody that works at the gas station or somebody I met in beauty school. But it was just like crazier and crazier versions of I'm cheating. And I think that
More,
formula worked.
yeah,
And he
more
was
and
just
more
so
outrageous.
funny. Yeah, more and more outrageous. And he was just so funny. And honestly, we used to get like 1,500 calls a week. People started giving us the ideas. You know, I'll never forget. I had one person call and they're like, I'm cheating on my husband with somebody with Tourette's. I'm like, awesome. What do they say? Like, you know, they just got like it had to get crazier and crazier even to lift an eyebrow. Like,
Right.
they all started sounding normal to me after working there for a couple of years. You're like, oh, that's not that crazy. How long's that been going on? And who do you want to be with? Like,
Like you've heard everything at that point. Well, and then I didn't follow it much at the time because I was just in high school and a teenager. But like, how did it end? Did Jerry get tired, or what, did it slip in the ratings, or like what did that turn into by the finale of it?
oh my gosh. I mean, he was on the air for, I think, 27 years, but he got an opportunity to do Dancing with the Stars. And then his security guard, Steve, ended up getting the opportunity to try being a host. And now Steve Wilkos, the one with the bald head that all the ladies liked and they'd like rub his head, that became a thing too. He got
Yeah.
his own show. And
Okay.
so Jerry just got other opportunities, but yeah, he was on like The Masked Singer, Dancing with the Stars. He got a court TV show for I think 3, 4, 5 years. He had his own opera. I mean, the guy has done everything.
He's lived a life.
He has lived a life. Yeah. And he was such a mensch behind the scenes. Like he did a lot of philanthropy work that people didn't even really know about, which is kind of cool.
Right. There's just it's weird how just what you get known for is this random thing and maybe the most attention getting. And so as far as how we can learn and apply this to our own mission and what we're building, can you tell me about like has your show evolved? Because I'm a big believer in just you go and you record stuff, you figure out the lighting and the camera and the format later, and it ends up being better based on the data and the feedback than if compared to if you just brainstormed and invented a bunch of stuff. And so like how long has your daddy podcast been going, and what's that been like from the beginning compared to now?
Great question. Yes, it has definitely evolved. In the beginning, I wanted to do like those sensational stories. I interviewed like a Jeffrey Epstein survivor and a guy who was formerly KKK and had a Jewish conversion. I was trying to go after those like shock and awe type of stories. One, because I was interested in them, and two, because obviously I thought they would get more clicks. And what's interesting is I had a couple interns in the beginning, and I said to them, hey, if there's a YouTuber that you like, or an idea that you have, or a daddy story that you come across, let me know. And so one of my interns found this guy, Alex Meyer, and he was doing like comedic reactions to like 80s sitcoms. And he had never told his like personal story. And the moment I dropped that episode, oh my God, I got like thousands of listens. I was like, what the heck is going on here? You know what I mean? And so I was like, oh, wow. Like if you interview people that already have an audience and they haven't told their personal daddy story, or like what they've learned from their dad, or kind of their upbringing, you can tap into their audience because people are already searching them,
Right.
and you're going to get like instant new listeners. So that was like my first kind of like aha moment where I was like, oh, whoa. You know what I mean? I just didn't know that. And so then I started reaching out to other podcasters and shows that had never really gotten personal. And I interviewed a couple more like that, where I had like a spike of listens of like 50,000 in like one episode. And for me, that was just like obviously a lot more than I normally get. This guy, his name is John May, and same thing. Like he is kind of big in the horror space. Like he does conventions and interviews people. He's a comedian. He's been in the podcaster space for a long time. Kurt Sasso of Two Geeks Talking, he'd interviewed, he's been doing interviews for 15 years. Has interviewed people in the comic book space, done thousands of interviews. So you get their personal stories, and people search for them. People want to know what they're up to. And yeah, so that John May guy of the Binge Watchers podcast, he put the episode on his website, which is where all his traffic is. And he had not really told that story ever before. And he's the one that where I got like the 50,000 listens, where I was like, in 4 days. So I was like, okay, I need to sprinkle these in. You can do things
Yeah.
that you're interested in, but at the same time, it might be good to collaborate with other people that are also building communities and interested in telling their personal story.
100%. Because as you say, people they have an audience, so they might post it and other people are searching them. And I even found that personally, I like that. If there's someone that I follow, like a YouTuber or like a thought leader or something, sometimes I'm like, man, how did they get started? And I find that a lot more useful, right? Where did they struggle early on in their 20s or 30s? And like, sure, they have whatever their current bread and butter is, their project right now, but the origin story, or the more relatable stuff, like it's way more entertaining. And it seems like you were able to apply these transferable skills you picked up from Jerry Springer of like finding out what seems good and filtering out potentially theoretically 4,000 calls, and there's not as many as when it was on daily TV, but still, like, right, there's a lot to sift through, and being like, well, would this be good to talk about? And then you've applied this to saying, well, someone normally has what they talk about. They go on a podcast, there's the usual questions, talk about their business. You're like, well, hey, I'm going to dive deep and talk about what really interests them, or what really frightens them, or what they've been struggling working on. And like, these are all things that, like, I think sometimes I've done this on accident, right? If I have a guest that's like boring and they want to talk about like mergers and acquisitions or SEO or something, I'm just like, tell me more about where you struggled, or tell me about 20 years ago, or tell me about what you're stuck on now. Like, it's way more fun, right? It's way more human and relatable. And so as far as on that subject, like, what are you struggling with? Like, what's down deep for you as far as what makes you happy, what makes you sad? Like, what's on the inside for you?
I was still thinking a little bit more even about your last question. Like, if you have somebody that just wants to talk about like mergers and acquisitions, you're like, what do you do for fun? Like, do you have
Yeah.
any hobbies? Like, can we get off of that? Right.
Yeah.
Um, what makes me sad? That's, whew. I think that as somebody, like, I feel like I've been kind of a high achiever, and I've like gotten my name in the credits a bunch of times. And I may have a bit started my podcast as for like selfish reasons, right? Like I wanted to show people what I was made of.
Sure.
But then it became more of how can I help people? Like people kept coming to me in my DMs and like asking me, how can I start a podcast? How can I tell my story better? If I'm an introvert, how do I get on camera? How do I make my lighting better? What mic do you use? And I was like, oh, wow, I could do episodes on all of that. Or
Yeah.
like if I listen to a podcast, and I'm like, wow, you're so creative. I love your research. I love your bits. I love how can we I was like, can we do a Better Call Daddy version of that? I literally reached out to a guy today. His name is Rich Lewis, and he does Street Curb Curiosity. And he was like former iHeart, worked in radio for, a decade plus, and super creative. All his episodes are solo. I'm like, dude, how do you do that? Your research is good, your comedy is good, your flow is good, your sound is good. Could you help me do like a Rena version of that? Right. So I guess what makes me sad is like when I message somebody like that and then I don't get a response, or, just me wanting to reach a celebrity and, not getting a response, or, when I have an idea and then I'm like, I've asked them 10 times, why am I not getting a response? So for me, it's just always wanting to do more. And I feel like, uh, just realize that I am still growing. I am still accomplishing things, and, not tying my worth to the outcome thing.
Yeah, and that's difficult to do, isn't it? And it's that awareness that, well, it's a numbers game and rejection is part of it, and there's always more to do. And even if you sent that DM, I mean, we're all busy, right? They might not see it until DM number 8, or the timing might not be good. And I like your thought process here of just absorbing what others have created, right? If someone is better with the comedy or the bits, like how can I apply that to what it is that I'm doing? And then it goes the other way too, right? Where you say that you have these skills, you know about lighting, microphone, podcasting, the show format. I mean, you worked on Jerry Springer, right? You've seen some things, you know some things. And I'm curious about how that applies to you in making money and growing your business. You say that you help people with podcasting. And so, like, what's that look like? What's the service or the offer?
Yeah, so, sometimes I go to, like, these local meetups or whatever, and you lead with your heart, and you lead with your why, and you tell people what gets you out of bed in the morning, and I'm like, "Hey, if you ever wanna run a studio, or you ever want me to, like, research you and do an interview on you, I'm kind of like a interviewer for hire, or I can help you start your own podcast, or if you don't wanna pay me to start your own podcast, I also, like, have a podcast cheat sheet kind of thing that I've developed, and I can tell you a beginner mic, a medium mic, a upgrade mic. I can tell you all the recording platforms. Yeah, you can find this stuff on the internet and you can search out all the platforms and all the prices and where people start. But if you want my version of that, we could do a couple coaching calls. And so, sometimes I do coaching calls with people, not just on like what mic to use, but like mindset, or like practicing your intro, or, if you're 25 episodes in and you're like, I have no freaking idea like which way I want to go, like I help people with that too. So yeah, I kind of started doing that just because people came to me for that. And, you can't help everybody. So,
Sure.
um, I haven't like created a course, but one thing that I love doing is like the in-person thing. So I've even like been a part of different conferences where I set up and interview people live. And I think that that's really good practice. It's less edited. It's a different feel. You can't research the person as much because you don't know who's going to walk up. You just have to be a good listener. You have to be quick on your feed, and you have to kind of know like your surroundings. You can see who's speaking at the event and kind of what's being covered at the event and how many years the event has, been happening. So you kind of got to do your research that way. But as far as who you're interviewing, oh man, it's so great to interview people that you're not over researching.
Right. And just embrace that moment of life. And it's so important, especially now these days, right? These ideas of charm and charisma and thinking on your feet when there's so much of the shortest tension span, social media, AI, what's it even going to turn into? And you figure, well, if everyone else's social skills are not as good, then I really need to lean into and beefing up my social skills and the communication skills, and for the purpose of like making money, building a business, but also helping people out. And it's like, so, I mean, there's the fear of not talking to strangers, and that's a lot of a mindset to get over, right? But there's also like so many people like don't even get the chance to talk about themselves. Like if you talk, there's that the intention to reply, not to listen. And if there's someone like you or like me who like is talking to them and saying like, well, hey, tell me about your childhood, tell me about what you're working on, tell me about what you want to happen for the future, like so many people are just like like not able to speak or waiting for their turn to speak. And it's great that this whole podcasting thing exists, and it brings to mind this idea that like anyone can be on a podcast, right? And that's like a something that didn't exist before, right? They'd have to call in Jerry Springer and hopefully they'd make the cut. They might as well be trying out for American Idol with the very small chance of being on. And so do you have anything to say about if someone is hesitating to put themselves out there, be on a podcast, start a podcast, like everything you've seen, what can improve someone's confidence or just get them over the hump so they can take action?
That's such a good question. I think there's a few things. One, I mean, the technology, like you said, is there. You could literally ask ChatGPT to write you a solo episode about yourself, and you could practice what ChatGPT says about you and record it.
Ooh.
You could put a picture of like somebody like your husband or your kid or your best friend next to the computer and talk to them. Stand up, sit down, talk to them, get more comfortable practicing it. Guest on a show. Listen to somebody else's podcast, search listennotes.com about different subjects that you're into. If you're into health and wellness, if you're into AI, if you're into religion, history, search what shows are talking about that. Listen to somebody else's podcast, multiple episodes of that podcast. See if that's somebody that you feel like you could vibe with. And if so, tell them which episodes, what you learned. Don't just pitch slap them and be like, hey, I'd be great for your show. Tell them what you can add to the conversation, what value you bring, and why you want to be on their show. And there's a lot of shows that will let you on. I mean, people are looking on Threads, people are looking on Twitter. Search the hashtags podcast, search hashtags podcast show, podcast addict, see who's talking about that. Podcast guest. There are different services, even like Podmatch, where you can, put up your profile and pitch yourself there. And if someone's interested in the same things that you're interested in, they might pick you. But I would say, start recording yourself, guest on other people's podcast before you start your own. And if you want to try to start your own, like interview style, which a lot of people do, interview a relative, interview a friend, interview a colleague, interview somebody who you've done business with who believes in you, that will give you some grace.
Very nice. And that's all helpful and that's all doable. So you're saying education and repetition to get this new habit figured out, which it is scary and it is awkward because it's this thing that you haven't done and a lot of things don't make sense, but get over that, chip away at that, read on the threads, look up the Podmatch, the podcast addict, and just and by doing that you really stand out, won't you? Because so many, like, this, right, as a podcast host, like so many people, they show up on your show, they don't even know what the name of the show is, right? They've never even listened to a single episode. And if you're someone that just has listened to 5 minutes worth or 3 episodes worth, like, man, you'll be so much deeper into that show than so many other guests have been. And so you've given us so many cool ideas and things that we can go forth and do, right? Use ChatGPT to help you strategize it, interview the family member, just get over the nerves, get those reps in. But as far as them contacting you, I know you said like you don't have a course yet, but yeah, everyone has social media and a website. So if someone should be reaching out and contacting you, how do they do that? And what should they be contacting you for?
Thank you so much. Yeah, bettercalldaddy.com has all of my social media and a lot of my episodes, and it links to Megawatts Productions, which is my production company. You can also email me at Reena@bettercalldaddy.com. And yeah, if you want to start a podcast, if you want to guest on podcasts, if you're looking for sponsors for your podcast, I help people with all of those things. Or if you just want to feel seen and heard, I'm
Oh,
always
very
looking for good
nice.
daddy stories. Yeah.
So if you have that good daddy story, then maybe you can be on the Better Call Daddy podcast and be part of that, right? Because just like reality TV or Jerry Springer, you can watch it, but you can also participate and be part of it. So bettercalldaddy.com, that's where you can find the email address, Rena at bettercalldaddy.com. And you can click over to Megawatts Productions if you're the kind of person that, as she said, you want to be on a podcast, guest on podcast, start a podcast, improve what you're doing, right? If you're at that dreaded 20 episode mark and you're like starting to get tired, well, hey, maybe it's time to convert it into an interview show or change up the lighting or change up the format. Rena's seen so much, she can breathe that new life into it and revitalize it. And so before I let you go, I have two things to get from you. The first is like a real tricky one. It's in any kind of conversation, there's always the hidden space, right? There's always, you have a conversation and then 2 days later you're like, oh, I should have asked this of Rena. Why didn't I think of that? And so that's where I need a little bit of help from you is, what's the missing hidden question in our conversation? What should I be asking you, but I just don't know to ask you?
I think that, people always want to know how to break into the industry. And, I got opportunities in so many different ways. One, I feel like kind of a secret thing you can do now is like LinkedIn was my first love because you can really just search up people's titles on there of people that you would love to connect with and that are working at companies that you would love to work for. And if you're not like, hey, can I pick your brain? But hey, wow, you've kind of had a career that it looks like I would dream of having. Could I just talk to you for 10 minutes? I'm a mompreneur. I have kids getting ready to enter the workforce. Would you be willing to like talk about your career and like dive deeper with me and just tell me how you got there for 10 minutes? I think that that is like a secret weapon. I've kind of use that mompreneur brand a few times to reach people that I would dream of having conversations with. So I think that that's kind of a hack. And then, another secret is like Craigslist has like a TV film producer section. See what's happening local in your area. That's how I got Judge Alex, was
Ooh.
in the TV film section of Craigslist. And a lot of times, like, there's local films happening or script supervisor roles or, just productions locally that you might be able to get into. So I would say that. And then, there's like Film Commission or Producers Guild of America, Writers Guild of America. See what it takes to get into those organizations. And are there any opportunities that you might be able to do through those organizations? I've got really good jobs that way as well. Nanny 911 came from being a part of the Producers Guild.
Very cool. You're such a networking master, and I love your personality and your spunk. And it's amazing just to know that these things exist, right? That you can go on LinkedIn. These are real people. You can have these conversations. You can see what's happening in Craigslist and get the guilt by association and the EEAT and all that good stuff, right? Of just being around these people who are who've achieved similar things that you want to achieve in your life goals. And if you think that you're just going to figure it out or magically luck out and happen, it won't happen. You have to deal with the rejection and contact these people, get these people in your orbit so that way you can pay off later and just live an amazing life and accomplish the things that you set out to do. But the first step in that is to start listening and to get some of these good ideas in your head, get some of this podcast inspiration. And the place to start with that is bettercalldaddy.com. You listen to those recent episodes, you have some laughs, you get some insights, and then you can click over to Megawatts Productions if you want to take a next step there. And so because we're a couple of seasoned podcasters, Miss Rena, you know, and especially in entertainment, that you need to end with a bang instead of a whimper, right? You have to have a really good ending. And so the way I do that with my podcast format is I end by asking about a fun quote or lesson that has served my guests in life or in business. So in the spirit of the grand finale of our conversation, what kind of quote or lesson in life or business do you think would be helpful right now?
Nothing changes unless you change. And I even used that yesterday when I was like, my kids are running late for school and there's this event that I want to go to and it's in a location I've never been to before. But I had put on my mascara, I had put on a little lipstick, I was like ready. And I was like, you know what? Even if I only meet one person at that event, I've got the time. I'm going to do it. I'm going to push myself. So look for opportunities, mix things up. If you feel bored, other people are going to feel bored listening to you. So if you've gotten in too much of a routine or you're not getting new results, mix things up and go somewhere new. Nothing changes unless you do.
Very nice. Mix things up, push yourself. They call that the locus of control, right? Is that what can you change to change some of those results? And let's think about that as we go to bettercalldaddy.com. Tune into that podcast. It's so fun. Even just, I mean, I imagine you go to events, you say the name. It's funny just on its own. So you accomplished something amazing. Miss Rena Friedman Watts from the Better Call Daddy podcast. It's been a blast speaking with you. So thanks for being here.
You are a fantastic host. Thank you so much. This is such good energy. I really appreciate you, Robert.